But this DOS gave me the opportunity to do this one. So in the last few that we've done, we talked about the crucifixion, we talked about the different theories as to the resurrection, right? We're going to switch gears a little bit. So sometimes in CLC we're going to discuss theological things, right? And sometimes in CLC we'll discuss things that are pertinent to what's going on in the world right now, right? Many of you have probably heard on the news, heard of the protests in the United States, around the world, the war that's happening in Israel. And so what I wanted to share with you today is some of that history and how did we get to this point, so that as you guys begin this process of kind of analyzing for yourself different aspects of what's going on in the world today, you'll have a better perspective. One of the things that's frustrating to me as an educator is listening to individuals speak on subjects when they have not done any research on it whatsoever. Basically 99% of social media, right? Social media has opened an avenue for our world in which I don't have to have any expertise, and yet I can talk about any subject I want as if I was a world-renowned researcher in that field, right? And so we need to fix that to some degree. You guys need to be much more educated about different things that are going on in our world so that you can make rational, logical decisions as to where you stand on certain issues. Now, I will also say that there are times in which things are biblically based and there are times where it may be politically based. Okay? So, we're going to discuss through all of these things. What I will tell you is that every decision and rationale that we make is based on our worldview, what we believe to be true. If I were to tell you that if you eat ice cream, we are going to chop your hand off, you may choose to desire to have ice cream, but the consequence for the ice cream may be to a point that you are willing to give up ice cream. Right? The idea is that I may have a belief system. My wife wouldn't give up ice cream, but my belief is that if I thought that speeding was wrong to the point that it is some serious consequence, I would probably not speed. For those of you that have a license, right? We have right and wrong that we define, but if we don't believe that the penalty for the wrong is great enough, we may be willing to do the wrong. All right? I know that's a little complicated, but just stay with me, okay? So we're going to kind of discuss this idea of Israel and Palestine, what they are, who they are, where did they come from, how did this happen? And then you guys can begin to take that information. The goal is that we don't stop at CLC, that you begin a process of research and understanding on your own. Right? And so we're going to kind of get some ideas about what's going on in this area of the world that seems like it's way over there, right? It has nothing to do with us. It's way over there. And yet, we're seeing it on our college campuses and in the streets of some of our cities right here in the United States. So what is it and what does it mean? So let's talk. I know this is a little bit small, so I'll do the best I can here, but let's get an idea of some of the terms that you will hear. You'll hear the term Israel, which we know is a country, and then we have what's called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Those are three terms that you'll probably hear throughout this. And so I just want to kind of point some of this out to you on a map. I think I have a little bit. So this right here, all of this here is Israel. Okay? By the way, Israel is not that big. Okay? So all of that, you see all of this land, all of this in here, that's the size of about New Jersey. Okay? The best we have, estimate-wise, about the size of New Jersey. Right? But in that, there's about 9 million people. Okay, all of this 9 million people. So then we have this right here, this area right there is called the West Bank. We're going to talk about the West Bank in a little bit, but the West Bank is controlled by Islamic, by the Muslims. Okay, so Muslim and Islam, similar terms. Okay, so this area right here, and we'll talk about how that happened in a minute, but this, called the West Bank, this is controlled by Muslim. And then this little strip of land, that little bitty strip of land right there, that is the Gaza Strip. This is where all that stuff, what was it, October the 7th or something like that. So people from here came over into here, captured people and killed people, and brought them back there. And that's how all this started. Okay? So this little bitty piece of land, by the way, in that little bitty piece of land, there's over 2 million people. Right there, there's 3 million people in all of that. Okay? In addition to that, something really important to understand is that this is controlled by Muslims, this is controlled by Muslims, this is controlled by Jews, this is Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, all Muslim countries. Okay? So, you've got this little bitty piece of land in the yellow here. I mean, it's supposed to be all of it, but anyway, we'll talk about that. But this little bitty piece of land that's yellow, that's what we understand is Jewish Israel. Okay? So understand where they sit in the midst of the world here. All right? So little bitty place and surrounded by those that are in conflict with them. So let's get a little history. How do we get to that map? All right? So this gives you a little bit of an idea. So the history of Israel began with Abram, who becomes Abraham, right? Nearly 4,000 years ago. That's really not great, is it? Sorry. Maybe it's not your eyes, it's my eyes, I guess. But in the land of Canaan, so what we see now as Israel was originally called Canaan. Okay, so when you're reading your Bible in the Old Testament and you see Canaan, we're talking about the same physical location, right? And so remember, God comes down and he says to Abram, I'm going to give you this land and your descendants and et cetera, right? All right, so then we have kind of this line, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? These are kind of the big three, right? So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is Isaac is Abraham's son, Jacob is Isaac's son. And so this is the lineage that kind of starts that process. And then we get to this guy. What do we know about this guy right here? Jacob. What do we know about Jacob? Come on, help me. Jacob's sons are who?
12 tribes.
What? Okay.
The 12 tribes.
12, thank you. There's 12 of them, right? 12 boys, and these 12 boys, that's a lot of kids, by the way. 12 boys, and they're going to have we're going to have the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? And the reason they call it the 12 tribes of Israel is because Jacob is going to get renamed Israel. So his name becomes Israel. And these are the 12 tribes of Jacob. Okay? So 12 kids, we get this group now. All right? So now we've got Israel going. And then this is going to be fine until we get to 70 AD. So we have this established group of people. They have this land of Canaan. They've developed it. They've grown it, etc. And then in AD 70, we get a change. Now, that's a long period of time, right? Abraham is way back there in the Old Testament, way BC. He's back in the BC years, way back there. Like almost, I don't know, 20-some hundred BC or whatever it is. And now we've gone all the way up to 70 AD. And then there's this guy that comes on the scene by the name of Nero. How many have heard of Caesar Nero? Yeah, okay, great, 2 of you. Wonderful. Oh, maybe a few more. All right, so Nero was nuts. That's the easy way to discern from Nero. Nero was one of the craziest, maybe not the craziest, but one of the craziest Caesars to ever live. This guy was crazy. One of the things that he would do is persecute Christians simply because he didn't like them. Now, this is the period of time, by the way, when you start to see this little symbol that we see today of the fish. You know the little fish? And people say, oh, that's Christians, right? You see the fish. Well, how did that come about? Anybody know the story of the fish? Yep.
That was like the symbol used to determine, like if you're in the safety of other Christians. Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So what they would do is they take a little stick, because if the Romans found out that I was a Christian, it was punishable by death. So they would take a little stick, and in the sand, they'd draw that little fish. And if the other person drew the little fish, they knew, okay, I'm with Christians. I'm with other believers. That was the fish. That was the reason for the fish. And so, so Nero, this guy, would catch Christians. He was there from 66 to 70-ish AD, 71 maybe. And what he would do is he would take a stake, he would drive it through the Christian from the backside through the back of the neck. He would drive a stake through them alive. They were still alive. And then he would put tar all over them, still alive, and he would light his gardens at night. They became human candles. So this guy was really crazy. He was in love with his mother and his sister, and he had children, and it was a mess. All right? You want to study somebody that was crazy, you can go look up Nero. All right? So this guy was crazy, but part of what and he ended up, by the way, burning the city of Rome. But that's a different story. So this guy Nero, he and the Romans, they just start killing Christians. I mean, basically, the penalty for being a Christian at this time was just death. And again, he would use them. Sometimes he would throw them in the arena. Any of you guys been to Rome? Anybody been to Rome, right? And see the big arena over there, right? Where they would put Christians out there, and others, they would put criminals that have done whatever, and they would put them out there, and they would face the animals, the lions, and etc. And the humans didn't win very, very often, right? And so they would kill these people. And what they did is they decided that because Jerusalem was kind of like the capital, the center of this group of people, that they were going to get rid of that as an opportunity for people to gather. And so they declared the land of Israel would be no more in 70 AD. It's no longer a country. It's no longer a group of people. And so they smashed this, and to this end, they renamed the land of Israel, basically Judea, as Palestina, which becomes the term now we use, Palestine. Okay? And so this was a word that was going to attempt to minimize the Israeli people, the Jewish people. So we're taking, not only are we taking away your country, what we're going to do is take away who you are as a people. We're going to rename you. Right? And so, hence the reason we now have formulated this idea of Palestine. Okay? All right. And so, we have this verse in Ezekiel, and so the idea is that as we get into the book of Revelation, which is later, the book of Revelation is going to talk about the idea of the Jewish people coming back together as a nation. 70 AD, they're gone as a nation. In order for the end times to occur, according to Revelation, we must reestablish Israel. Establish Israel as back as a country. Okay? And in Ezekiel it says, "Behold, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone," meaning dispersed out into the whole world, "and bring them into their own land." I'm going to bring them back. And as we began to talk about when's the Lord coming back and end times prophecy and all of that kind of stuff, this all ties together. And so in 1922, again, 70 AD to 1922, so we have a long period of time here, no Israel. In 1922, the British, right after World War I, are going to take over this area, and they're going to mandate for Palestine to sought a homeland for the Jewish nation. So they're basically going to say, hey, we're going to open this area back up to the Jews. Now it's not considered a country, but it's like a province of the British government, and we're going to allow the Jews to start coming back to what we believe to be their homeland. That happens in 1922, but not a country. But at this time, you began to see thousands and thousands of Jews from across the world start coming back to this area. Okay? And then, on May 14th of 1948, the Jews proclaimed an independent state of Israel, and the British withdrew from what it was considered Palestine. 1948, really important date, because now we have Israel reestablished as a country. So you start talking about Revelation and you're saying, oh, pre-1948, there is no Israel. What about, how is Israel going to come back? How is that possible? From 70 AD to 1947, no Israel. But now in 1948, Israel reemerges as an independent state in this area called Palestine. So now you begin to see the conflict, right? Palestine was its own thing. Not a country, but its own area. Israel comes in and says, this is now ours. This was always ours. We're taking it back. It would be similar in the United States if the American Indians came to the United States government and said, hey, you're on our land. Time for you to go. We probably wouldn't take that very well. But it is a similar feeling that these Palestinians would have had to these Israelis. So kind of get that picture in mind. You already have conflict just simply because of the land itself, the physical land. All right? Israel, just to be, as what we talked about earlier, is surrounded by Islamic countries. So now we have this group called Hamas. How many have heard of Hamas? Right? You probably hear it on the news. You probably hear it, from time to time on social media. Who is Hamas? Or what is Hamas? Okay, terrorist group. That's interesting. So Hamas is an acronym. Hamas means that. I can't pronounce that. So we use Hamas. But what that means is Islamic resistance movement. That's what Hamas is. It's an Islamic resistance movement. It was founded in 1987. 1948, Israel's back. 1987, we have conflict during that time, but 1987, all of a sudden now they go, we've had enough. We're going to take back our country. And so in 1987, during the first Palestinian uprising against Israel occupiers of Gaza and the West Bank, they connect with a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. So they began this process of trying to take back what they believed to be theirs, and in 2006, they actually began to win seats in a democratic election. So they're like, hey, vote for me. And then they did, people did vote for some of them. And in those areas in which Hamas folks won, after 2006, all elections stopped. We won, now we're done. We're in power, you don't get to vote us out. Okay? So now they kind of control this area in the West Bank and in Gaza, this little bitty Gaza Strip and then the West Bank. And it's because they first started politically. Isn't that interesting? With all the killing and the threats and so on, they started politically, and from the politics, they then expanded to what it is now. You got to think through that. Key number one, elections matter. You guys will be voting or have already started voting. Elections matter. Who we put into authority and power, whether it be at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, matters. Hence the reason that you should not be voting based on some political party. You should be voting based on position. What does this individual believe to be true, and does that align with what I believe to be true? It matters. And in this case, they lost an entire region of their country simply because of an election. In 1997, some of you said this, they're a terrorist group. In 1997, the United States of America declared that Hamas was a terrorist group. And several other countries around the world joined the United States in that. So it is labeled by us as a terrorist group. And then the group calls for the establishment of the Islamic Palestinian state that would replace the current state of Israel. It believes in the use of violence to carry out the destruction of Israel. So Hamas is Islamic. Okay? Those two things go together. So those that are in Hamas are Muslim. Not all Muslims are in Hamas. Okay? And you just separate those two things. But the very essence of this political position is a religious position. So in the United States, we would say that religion drives our ability to vote. We vote based on our worldview, what we believe to be true. But politics are not religion. Okay? So a politician is not a pastor. A politician looks at government and rule of law and all of those things, and we would want, as Christians, for those politicians to direct their position from a Christian worldview. And we vote accordingly. But in this case, politics and religion are one. They are considered an Islamic state, meaning everything that drives their decision making will be based on their belief system. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the Muslim ideology. What is it that they believe? Now before we do this, there are two major groups of Muslims in our world. There's other little branches, but there's two major groups, and they're the Sunni and the Shia. Okay? Some call it the Shiite. The Muslims are based in two areas, the Sunni and the Shia. Anybody know the difference between the two? Yep.
Didn't they come around because they had different ideas about who should be the leader?
Yes, to some degree, that is correct. So when Muhammad dies, it is believed by the Sunni that the next best guy should take over. Guy, by the way, not her. Sorry, ladies. But the guy, the next best guy. And he does not have to be directly related to Muhammad. He just has to be the best option. Those are the Sunni. And by the way, the Sunni outnumber the Shiite or the Shia by, I don't know, 9 to 1 or something like that. Sunnis are huge numbers, Shia, very small numbers. The Shia believed that only a direct descendant of Muhammad can be the leader. Okay? And over the years, after Muhammad's death, these two never saw eye to eye, and they actually war against one another. Okay? In this area, Hamas is Sunni. Okay? The group of Hamas is Sunni, and the majority of people in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip are Sunni, meaning the larger group of the Muslims. And many believe a little bit more radicalized group. Okay? So here are the belief systems of the Muslims. There are 5 pillars to being a good Muslim. 5 pillars, and then jihad. Jihad is not one of the pillars. So 5 pillars, and then jihad. First thing, if you're a good Muslim, you have to have confession of faith, which means you have to walk around and say there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. That's kind of what they have to chant. They have to talk about. That is their mantra. Second of all, you must pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. There are specific times. You must pray during those times. It is non-negotiable. Pointed towards Mecca. Mecca is a location, and that is where Muhammad set up shop. Okay? Then we have Ramadan. I know recently in the basketball tournament, who was it? An NC State player or something? Am I right, Mrs. B? I don't remember. One of the NC State players during the NCAA tournament was Muslim, and they kept talking about Ramadan. He's celebrating Ramadan, so he could not have food or water during daylight hours. They fast during daylight hours. And they fast everything. They throw in things like, sexual things, smoking, drinking, food. It's basically, I am going to remove myself from all things in daylight hours. Now, once dark hits, I can do whatever I want. But daylight can't. So they literally, for this guy, had all these snacks, rehydration stuff, just sitting there waiting. And as soon as the clock hit whatever was necessary for it to no longer be considered daylight, they were just funneling this stuff to this guy. Very, very devout Muslims will not even swallow their spit during this time. It happens for 1 month, sometime around March to April. It varies a little bit based on the calendar, but that happens every year, so it's 1 month every year. Almsgiving. So almsgiving here is you're expected as a good Muslim to give 2.5% of your entire wealth, your annual capital, not your annual salary, your annual capital, everything that you accrue in that year, to the poor, but you have to give it through a Muslim charity, which, by the way, they control. And they may decide that that needs to go to the poor government. Okay? And then the last one here is the pilgrimage. So all Muslims, assuming 2 things, that they financially have the wherewithal, and 2, they have the physical ability to, must go to Mecca at least once in their lifetime. That is a requirement. So they have to make the journey to Mecca from wherever they are in the world at least one time. And then the last one here, so those are the 5. Those are the things you have to live by. Those are like the tenets of the faith. And then the 6th thing here is jihad. What is jihad? Well, it's 2 things. We know jihad is like war, but jihad actually means 2 things to a Muslim. One, that you battle against temptation. So this is your war with yourself. I don't want to be a liar, so therefore I have to battle my own nature and not be a liar. Okay, so that's one form of jihad. The one we're more familiar with is the idea of the battle against those who oppose Islam. And the idea is that I defend Islam with my life, and it is a privilege to die for the cause. Now, if you are fighting a war, okay, well, let's make it even simpler. If I am playing a basketball game, and I'm willing to work really, really hard to win that basketball game, I'm going to be pretty successful if I keep practicing, right? But what if I'm willing to die to win the basketball game? Right? Things elevate very quickly. If we're in a war and I am trying to self-preserve, I don't want to die in the war, I'm going to do everything within my power to try and not die, when the other side is saying, I'm happy to die. In fact, it's better for me to die. Because if I die in jihad, I get all these extra things in heaven. So there is a benefit to dying for the cause. It's really hard to fight a war against individuals that want to die. Yes?
So that's like a 9/11 happened?
Yeah. They flew planes in with the idea that they wanted to, if they died in the cause, they get these extra things in heaven. You can look up that stuff, what they are. All right? So, that's the challenge that, now think about this. Here's the other issue that Hamas does, and several other of these extremist groups within Islam. They say, so the leaders say, you should die for the cause. Where are the leaders located? Well, they hole up in schools and hospitals and in people's homes, civilians, children. They basically use children and sick people as their human shields. So it would be like me saying to you guys, hey, listen, God needs you. And I'm going to need you to go over there and kill yourself and blow up other people for the cause. And while you're doing that, I'm going to be over there out of harm's way. And that is what is happening. Leaders are saying, do as I say, not as I do. I want to preserve because I'm really, really important, and if I were to die, then that hurts the cause. But if you die, you're helping yourself. That's a pretty twisted way to think. All right? So now we have kind of an ideology of these folks, and remember that all the way around this country are Islamic countries. And so now, in the United States, we have a very large population of Muslims. And so we have seen recently these protests in the United States for the Palestinians. And we're going to talk about what is a Christian response in just a minute. But, so here's the situation. What I would encourage you, no matter whether it be this issue or any issue, understand what you're protesting for and understand what you're protesting against. It is shocking to me to listen to some of the interviews with these kids. They have no idea why they're there other than we want these people to be safe. Okay, agreed. But they have no concept of any of this. Most likely somebody invited them. They said, yeah, go. And we're going to protest the American way. Well, I think you need to be really cautious. There's a lot of you guys heading off to these colleges, campuses. There's going to be lots of this kind of stuff in the future. So know what you're protesting for and know what you're protesting against. So let's get just a basic idea of this situation. I have seen groups of people that have decided that they're a group of they self-proclaim homosexuals for Hamas. Mr. Knapp is laughing because that doesn't make any sense. Look, this comes from an Islamic website. These are not my words. This comes from them. Basically, we are debating on how to kill you. We don't really know if the Quran, it says it, both of these things, by the way, it doesn't know if we should burn you to death with fire or we should drop down stones from a high place and stone you to death. The result of either of these is what? Death. So these people that stand out there are going, we're for Hamas, and we're homosexuals, transgender, whatever. What they're saying is, I'm cheering for the side that would kill me if given the opportunity. And one of them recently, this one killed me. One of them recently was asked this question and said, hey, by the way, they don't like you. And this person's response was, well, Israel needs to check their privilege. I don't even know what that means. This is psychotic. As a Christian, I would say to a person that is practicing homosexuality, I believe that what you're doing is wrong. It is a sin. It is not biblical. But I am not asking to kill them. I will pray for them. I will debate them. I'll be happy to disagree with them. But I'm not trying to kill them. Ladies, you don't have it much better. I see these women, just protesting away. And I think, do you really understand Hamas? By the way, the Sunnah, which is one of the holy books, Quran, Sunnah, Hadith, those are the three big ones. The Sunnah basically says women are less intelligent than men. Because it requires, if somebody is to bring something before the leaders, I have a problem with something, I have to bring it before the leaders. As a man, I can bring something before the leader, and there needs to be two of us. So if two of us come and say, hey, I saw so-and-so doing whatever, then they're going to take that and run with it. But women, you only count as half. So for a woman, if I came with two women to share something, it would have to be two women, not one. So two women equal one man. Okay? So, in addition to that, there are very few women have academic opportunities like the men do, which is down here. Wives, so when you get married, by the way, you may be beaten if you're unsubmissive. Beaten. So, if I say to my wife, hey, will you get me a sandwich? And she said, I don't want to get you a sandwich today. And I can say, well, that's it. You didn't do what I asked you to do. How many ladies in here would go, yeah, I want to support that? Like, that is awesome. Now, guys, you can't support that. It's not okay. Right? By the way, men can marry up to 4 wives. By the way, this was Muhammad's rule in the Quran. He had way more than 4 wives. But he said it was okay because he was the quintessential prophet and he needed more. But everybody else had to live with 4. So 4 wives, you can divorce them whenever you want, man. If they don't do what you want to, you can beat them, get rid of them, whatever. You can divorce them. Wives, you are not allowed to divorce your husband. For any reason, can't do it. Men have unlimited concubines. These are simply other women who you can have sexual relationships with, but the concubines don't have the same authority as the wives. So they're even lesser than the wives. And by the way, adultery is a huge sin in Islam. Who do you think it's a sin for? The women, because if I could have 4 wives and as many concubines as I want, I don't know how that's not considered adultery. Right? But if a woman commits adultery or is accused by 2 men of being adulterous, it's punishable by death. And usually public execution. So women, Hamas. You see, it doesn't make a lot of sense that people are out there going, yes, we're for Hamas. Well, it doesn't fit. I mean, we have the same people who are protesting for women's rights in the United States are also people that are protesting for the support of Hamas. All I'm asking is that you guys think. Use your brains. Don't just accept something because somebody says something. I'm including Christianity in that. I believe Christianity holds up to the scrutiny. But this doesn't make sense. So how do we respond as Christians to this whole thing? It's still a bad thing over there. We are not interested in people killing other people, at least I would hope you're not. The first thing we have to understand is that God set apart the nation of Israel. God's chosen people, the Jews. And so they need to be protected, and Israel has a right to exist. There is a time for war. The Bible says that. There's a time for war, a time for peace, time to rise, time to sleep, etc. Right? There's a time for war. But it needs to be justifiable war. I believe that if you come onto our land and you take our people and kill our people, you have now made it justifiable. Now, how that happens is different. Okay? Again, the generals and the leaders of the military and the leaders of the political parties and all that, they have to make really hard decisions at that point. I've always said being the President of the United States would be the most difficult thing in the world because every time I make a decision, it is likely that people are going to die when we're talking about war. Peace should always be a desired outcome. Our desire should be to live in peace with one another. The Bible tells us that. And most importantly, I think we lose this sometimes in the fact that it's way over there. These are human beings. These are people. These are children, women, men. They're human beings. And on both sides, Muslims and Jews, they need to hear the gospel message. There are Messianic Jews that believe that Jesus came and rose from the grave, and they believe the exact same thing that an evangelical Christian believes. They celebrate the ceremonial pieces of the Old Testament, that they recognize Jesus as the Savior. But many of the Jews do not recognize Jesus as Savior, and ultimately that is what gets you into heaven. So, Muslims and Jews need to hear the gospel message. We have to be willing to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, whether it be a Muslim, a Jew, or a person down the street. So I want to encourage you, as you think about these things, and as hopefully that gives you a better perspective of what's going on over there. But this is not the only subject matter that you're going to face. You need to be well versed before you start deciding where you stand on certain things. Don't accept things simply because my friend said it. Don't accept it because I said it. Do your own research. Make sure that you understand what you're standing for and what you're standing against. That is awesome. So, any questions before I pray? All right, if you have questions, you're welcome to come up and talk to me.